Good morning. Welcome to the webinar on family-centered practices in early intervention. Our presenter today will be Debbie Ashley. She has worked as a special education teacher, an EI specialist, and an EI supervisor in Hamilton County. She received extensive training and certification through Siskin Children's Institute from Dr. Robin McWilliam, who's the author of the RBI. And she is also a certified master coach through training with Doctors Melissa Sheldon and Dathan Rush. It is my pleasure to introduce Debbie Ashley.
Thanks, Lori, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I know this is a busy time of year and things get crazy, so thanks for blocking off this time to talk with me and learn with me about family-centered practices in early intervention. Okay, my style is pretty informal, and if you have questions or things throughout the presentation, as Lori said, just type it in, and she'll make sure that to let me know what it is, and we can try and address it as it fits into the presentation. Okay, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with the 7 key principles. Those have been around for a few years, and we've really been working to make sure that everything we're doing really follows and fits into these principles. So as we look at the 7 principles, I want you to think about family-centered practices and if any of these might fit into that. Okay, so the first principle is that we know that children learn best when they're with the people they know in places they know. Does that fit into family-centered practices? Absolutely. You'll see these really all fit in. It's kind of the key to how family-centered practices evolved and why they're so important. Okay. The second principle is that we know that all families can help with their child's development, their learning, and be supports. But it's up to us, number 3, as a service provider, to support those families and caregivers, to find out what supports they already have in place and what resources and how we can support them to be able to enhance their child's learning and development. And the fourth one is that it comes down to, from beginning to end of services, that it's really all about the family and the child, what the family's preferences are, what their learning styles are, because we all have different styles. So it's important to know how best to reach a family, and also to be aware of and acknowledge their cultural beliefs. The fifth one is again really a key one for family-centered practices, is that the outcomes have to be important to the families. It has to meet a need for the family, and it has to be functional. What are they doing, and when does it fit in? The sixth one is the whole primary service provider model. I think most counties are doing that now in Ohio, and if you're not, you're working towards it. Okay, so that there's just one main person working with the family, and that person has a team behind them who can give them support either through team meetings or maybe a joint visit, okay? And also supports from out in the community. What supports is the family already receiving, and are there other things that would be beneficial that you can help them get support from? And then the last one is really kind of putting all that together, that what we're doing all those things we just talked about, are validated, and they're based on the best research, okay? And that we're also following the rules and regulations from your county, from the state, and also federal. So the federal ones, the state is pretty good at making sure we're following all of those and keeping in line with that. So, but we always are looking for, research and And is there a way we can do things differently that would provide a better service to families? So as we look at this and we think about family-centered practices, I'm going to read this. It's kind of long, but family-centered practices, it's a particular type of help-giving style which builds cooperative relationships between parents, other family members, and practitioners that explicitly focuses on family capacity building as the way in which supports and resources are provided or procured. And that was from Carl Dunstan, 2014. That's a long sentence, and there's a lot in that. So you look at that and you think, oh, I know what family-centered practices are. But let's really take a look at that and break it down, because it's really talking about quite a few things. So help giving, that's our opportunity to provide them with our knowledge. What we know about certain things, certain types of development, what we know about resources, all those kinds of things. We're help giving. And cooperative relationships, that it's a partnership. You and the family are in it together. It's not about one person. This is a joint relationship. And then it also talks about family capacity building. Okay, and that's where really we work on supporting the parents, how they can feel more empowered, how they can feel more confident on what they're doing with their child or children. And then the last thing I talked about were supports and resources. And again, that's our opportunity to empower families with information. Not that we necessarily do it for them, but we give them information and we share what we know. Another way of looking at it is a way of organizing and delivering assistance and support to families based on distinct, interconnected beliefs and attitudes that are expressed through the behavior of service providers. So I think this one is kind of key, because families will feed off of us as we go in. Your attitude, how you present yourself when you're working with families, how you react when they talk about certain different things is going to make the parents kind of filter what they think and how they interact. So it's really important for us to go in with positive attitudes and really listening and hearing families, which is what family-centered practice is all about. So there really are two components in family-centered practices. There's the relational component, and there's also the participatory component. So we're going to break those down a little bit. You look at the relational practices. What does that mean? What is that related to family-centered practice? It's how you listen when families are talking. You know, what are you hearing them? Are you listening? Are you busy doing paperwork because you're running close on a timeline? What excuse me. How are you hearing them? And communication styles. We talked about that a little bit too. You know, are they, you know, able to understand what you're saying? Do they need to have you do, you know, more hands-on to show them for them to understand? Do they need to have pictures to help understand things? How do you build that relationship so that your communication is the best for particular families? Okay. VR, you present when you're with families. I just talked about that a little bit. Families pick up on how you react. Okay. If you go in and you're nervous and or you've just, you know, had a phone conversation and you're feeling really stressed when you walk in the house, different things like that, families pick up on that. And so that kind of makes them hold back a little bit, or they think maybe it's about them, different things. So you really need to be careful of how you're presenting yourself when you go in with families. And are you trying to understand their situations? Do you have empathy for them, for what's going on? You may think it's an easy situation, it's not a big deal, but to the family, it's very important, and it's their life. And so we really need to try and understand and have empathy for what families are going through. And each family's, their values and priorities. Okay. Family values, we may not have the same values families have, but at the time we are in working with the families, we accept them where they are, and those are the things that are of value to them. And their priorities may not be our priorities, but we're going to start where they are, and we're going to work from there. And all of that helps to support building trust, because it's all about building trust with the family, especially early on. The more comfortable they can feel with you, the better the relationship and the more progress that family is going to make. All right, so time to exercise our first poll if everybody's ready. Okay, so I don't just ask about cultural and religious practices with families. I respect them and try to learn and understand them and how they fit into the family's life. True or false? Are you getting responses, Lori? Lori?
Sorry, Debbie.
Oh, that's okay.
There we go.
Okay.
My microphone was muted, so I was only
Aha.
talking to myself. Okay, so we have 92% true.
Okay.
And we have about 67% of the people have voted.
Okay. All right. The answer to that, yes, would be true. You do want to learn about their cultural and religious practices, how that fits into the family's life, how that affects different things that are going on. How does that relate to ways that you can support and empower families? So it is important for us to know that information. Also, next poll. If a family's talking about something and you just really don't understand what they're talking about, do you tend to move on because you're rushed for time, thinking you'll go back and ask about it later, if you remember? Okay, true or false?
We've got 100% false so far.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give it another couple seconds.
Mm-hmm. Now it's 92% false.
Okay.
So almost everybody.
Okay. All right. Well, the correct answer would be false. Okay. If you don't understand something, ask them about it. You maybe feel like you're rushed for time, but it's pay me now or pay me later. If you don't find out about it, it's going to come back at some point and actually either be more time consuming, or you're going to have one of those, gee, I wish I'd have known that kind of moments. I think we've all had those. I know I have. And so it's better to take the time, find out what it is, so that in case it is something that really is impactful or affects how families operate on a daily basis, you want to have a good understanding of what goes on for that particular family. And sometimes we think we know. We have this image in our head of what we think something should look like, and it's really not how it looks for the family. So it's important for us to ask and have a good understanding, because we all know all families are different. Okay, so we have a handle now on the relational practices. So let's see what participatory practices are. Okay. We need to make sure that the families are actively involved, that it's not something that's being done to the families, it's being done with the family. You are sharing your knowledge. Okay, sometimes people kind of get a little worried thinking, oh, I can't tell them what I think or what I know about these things. Absolutely, your role is to share your knowledge. It's about joint practice. Okay. You may need to show a family, a parent, caregiver, how to do something, but then have them do it as well. If you're showing them first, make sure they get a chance to practice it and do it with you there. Or maybe it's just something you can verbally walk them through, okay? Or even just talk about with them, but make sure that they get to participate in whatever that activity or item is. Give them a chance to problem solve. That's kind of a biggie. I know, speaking from my own experience, I went into this because I'm a helper. I want to help families. I want to problem solve, and I want to problem solve for them. But it's really about problem solving with them. Okay. Give them a chance. Sometimes we know what a good solution might be because we've done this 100 times with other families. But if this family's just trying to figure it out, give them a chance to problem solve and come up with some other possibilities before you jump in and maybe give them another kind of solution. And empowering families. Okay, we want them to know about resources and supports that are out in the community that are available for them if they're not already connected. Okay. So, looking at participatory practice, let's do another couple polls. Okay. When families can't get to doctor's appointments because they don't have a car, we should always plan to take them because it helps them out. True or false?
So we have 100% false, Debbie.
Okay. Awesome, because it is false. Okay. We need to help them come up with a plan, a way to get there, but we can't be the ones to take them. Good job. Okay, one more. When I want to help a family learn a new skill, I do it with the child multiple times so they can see it, and then tell them to try it when the next opportunity arises. Would that be true or false?
So this one is a little bit more mixed. We have 50% for each one right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I would say the answer is false. Okay? Because you may need to do it, show the family a couple times. That's not a problem. But then you want them to do it with you there. Okay. Not trying it when the next opportunity arises, sometime when you're not there to give them the support or to answer questions as they're trying to do it. It might be a positioning thing, and maybe you're putting the child in the high chair. You may put them in, then maybe you want to take them out and let the parent do it so that they can try it, they can see it, they can see how it feels, they can ask any questions if they need to as they're trying to do it. So you really want to give them the opportunity to do it while you're still there with them. Okay. So if you got the true and false answers right, you're on your way. Okay. You're doing it. You know what it is. I want to read this. I know it's a little long, so bear with me because it's probably kind of small on your screen. But this has been around for a long time, this Welcome to Holland. It was written by a mom who had a child with Down syndrome, and it was kind of her experience. And I think we can learn a lot from this. So I'm going to read it, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. Okay. So when you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. You must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and for the rest of your life you will say, "Yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned." But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very loving things about Holland. So, again, that was written by a mom who had a child with Down syndrome and put her kind of perspective into looking at going on a trip, which I think is a really cool thing. So, what did we learn from that trip to Holland? Okay. That it's important for us to know where the family's coming from. Okay. They didn't plan to have a child who has a disability, who has a need for services, whatever the situation is. That was not their original plan. It's important to speak their language. Again, I think what she was referring to when she was talking about learning a whole new language is, sometimes we can be really good at our little alphabet soup with our, PSP and SPA and things like that, we need to explain those things to families because it's not in their vocabulary and they didn't plan on it being in their vocabulary. So it's important for us to make sure that we are speaking the same language with them. As much as families love you and they are usually sad when it's time for services to end, you need to remember that you were never in their plans. Okay? They love your support and what you're doing, but they never planned to have us in their life. Okay? So we're coming in not as something that was something they were necessarily looking forward to and thinking, oh, this is going to be, this is what I want. They want it because of the situation, but were it not the situation, they would never have expected to see you. It's important to meet them where they are. Okay? If they're still in Italy, you need to help them get to Holland. To see the positives, the Rembrandts, the tulips. There are positives in all situations, and so we may need to just kind of help them find some of those and empower them to enjoy their journey. Again, help them to see some of the beauty and things. And if you liked the poem, here's the link. You can get it to print it off if you want to share it with any families or anybody. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So what do we know? What does research tell us? Remember when we were talking about those 7 key principles, we talked about wanting to kind of be research-based. So what we know is that the more parents are involved in their child's early intervention in a capacity building manner, the more positive are both parent and child outcomes. So that capacity building manner is capacity building for the parents. How do we build them up? Okay. And you will notice that it also said that there are both parent and child outcomes. So we certainly can have both. Okay. It's a set of principles, but it guides us not only in what we do, but in how we do it. Again, kind of going back to those 7 key principles that fits into family-centered practices. What is it and how do we do it? So let's look at how we do it. So I'm going to go through a few slides here and then think about where your agency or where you might fall into the spectrum of things. And I will tell you, I have been around long enough that I have been through all of these. So I do know it's a process. So what about the professionally centered model? That's where we as professionals, think we know what the child and the family needs and what they need to do to get those needs met. Families are expected to do what we tell them, kind of, that they're going to depend on us for all the answers and to tell them what to do, and that the professional is the primary decision maker. Okay, so that would be if you all are still professionally centered. Okay, what about a family allied model? That's another model where we think that families, they can do it, but we just need to tell them what to do. Okay? We're going to be the ones to identify what needs to happen and when and what it should look like. But we feel like the family can do it once we tell them. Another one is a family-focused model, okay, where we think, well, we can give families some options and they can pick the option that they want to do. Okay. We kind of still are thinking we know what's best, and we're just going to lay out some options, thinking, okay, any of these options could work. And then we wait and we give them to the family and let the family decide which options they want to move forward with. So you see, each time we're getting the family just a little bit more involved each time. And the last one would be the family-centered model, what we've been talking about, that we see families, they're equal partners. Okay, it's not about us telling them. It's not about them telling us what everything is. We're equal partners, okay? And our intervention, our support for them is individualized, okay, to what the family needs. It focuses on strengthening and supporting the family's functioning. And families are the ultimate decision makers. So take a couple minutes to think about or discuss, if you're watching this with somebody on your team, perhaps, where do you and your agency fall? Where are you in this process of trying to get to family-centered practices? And feel free to put that in the chat so we can share, and Lori can share that with us. Lori, are we getting anything?
Not yet, Debbie.
Okay. Well, hopefully somebody will feel like sharing. We'll give it another minute. Okay, I'm going to guess we just have a quiet group today.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has responded.
No.
Okay. I hope you guys are still with me. So I'm going to move forward then. So we've talked about how it can be presented. So let's look at what it is. The first thing when we read the definition of family-centered practice, the things we talked about were that professionals view families as equal partners. So how does that work? Because a lot of times when we go in, families say, well, you're here, you should tell me what I need to do. They expect us to be the person to come in and tell them things. Sometimes families you feel aren't ready to be a partner. They just have so much going on and their life is in chaos. And so I'm just going to kind of take the lead and tell them what to do. We've all been in those situations, right? So we need to realize that it's up to us to change those perspectives. How do we change those perspectives? That's what we need to look at to move forward. A lot of it goes back to the very beginning. How are you explaining your program and your services to families? If we have a really good script for explaining it, then that helps them to understand that they are partners and it's not just all about a professional coming in and telling them what to do. A lot of counties I know have really good scripts and really good information that they share with families. And if it's something that you feel like you don't have a good explanation, then that's something that you could easily follow up with your consultants on. They can support you with that for sure. It's about our attitudes. Remember we talked about that earlier. You know, how do you go in? Do you go in with a positive attitude, but do you also go in with the attitude that, hey, we're in this together? Or do you go in with the attitude, I'm here, so I'm going to tell you what you need to do? Okay. Your attitude is going to go a long way in helping families understand the relationship, including them, having your conversations together. Don't talk about families without them being a part of it or without them being knowledgeable that it's going to happen. If you have a team meeting and you're going to be talking about that family, make sure they know that. They can call in if they want to call in, or they could actually come in if they wanted to. Make sure that they know what you're going to be talking about. Ask them if there's anything else they, feel like they want you to include when you're talking about them. Make them a piece of everything. The next part of the definition of family-centered practices was that the intervention is individualized, flexible, and responsive to the family identified needs of each child and family. That's the parents know the family the best. That's their big knowledge base to share is their family and their children and what things look like and what their needs are and what their supports are. So it's up to us to individualize. A lot of times we may have families that say, I'm okay if you come 10 o'clock every other week, that works fine, because that might fit into your schedule really well. But should it be happening that way? What about, we may have situations where we say, all families want their child or children to talk during playtime, so that's kind of my to-go outcome. It's kind of replaced my throughout the day that we're trying to get away from. Again, it's up to us to make those changes, to change those perspectives. And how do we do that? Okay. It should be individualized, and if you're doing a really good family assessment, you're going to be able to individualize because you're going to find out where things are stressful or more difficult for a family, where being able to use their words would help the most. Things like that, so that we know what time of day, where it is in a family's life that they need the most support. And shouldn't always be 10 o'clock every other week necessarily, because the visit should be based on your next visit plan, right? Maybe you're there, you have several outcomes you're working on with the family, and so you go at 10 o'clock because you're working on something related to eating at breakfast time. Another time you may go at 2 o'clock because you're working on something at the grocery store. You may meet them at the grocery, different things. So there should not always be a set every other week, every other time kind of visit with a family, unless that's absolutely the need of the family. Okay. Falls into what's most important to the family. Okay. What do they want to work on? Where do they need your support, your knowledge base? We need to remember to include everyone. This is sometimes difficult because we get so concerned about the child in the program that we don't think about other people in the house, what's going on. And sometimes siblings or other foster children or an aunt or somebody else in the house may be a really good support or a really good person to interact with, things like that, that we need to find out, and we need to include them. The next thing it talked about was strengthening and supporting family functioning. Excuse me. So sometimes we go into families and they say, I just want them to walk. But it doesn't seem like that really affects family functioning. So how do we work on that? How do we strengthen that? Or there's so much stress in the house, we just come in for respite. Okay. And I can give these examples because in my life in the past, I have done these things, and I have seen them and been part of them. You know, where we go in and then the mom says, "Oh, thank God you're here. I'm going to go clean up the kitchen." Okay, that's not really why we're there. Okay, but it's up to us to change those perspectives and help families to understand. Okay. So those of you who may have been doing this for a while, as I have, you know, you may have been in those situations, but we now know that that's really not our best role. So how do we help change parents' perspectives and really kind of change our own as we're doing it? So everything about the child affects family functioning. A family may say, I want them to walk, but you know, where does that fit in? Well, if you're doing a really good family assessment, you'll see how transitions are from one time of day to another time of day. And maybe that's where walking might fit into, or something that a family really wants to do, and they really want the child to be able to walk. Okay. So it's everything they do is a piece of the family's functioning and how that family works. And if we're really listening to families, we're asking open-ended questions, we're going to find out some of those more stressful times of the day for family. And that may lead us to outcomes into different areas as opposed to a go-to time of day, because it may be different. And if we may have to ask those open-ended questions, because families aren't always sure how much information we want. We want to try and stay away from yes and no and ask questions that will really help us to find out what those times of day look like and what might make the stressful times better. Again, I'm going to go back to explaining early on, we're equal partners. So you need to be part of these visits. Okay, we're not respite. We're not there for the family to go do something else. Sometimes you may have to explain it more than once on several visits, but you do what you need to do to try and help the families understand that they are as important a piece, if not more important of a piece, than we are. Families are the ultimate decision makers. Sometimes that's difficult for us because parents might want us to decide. Well, you're the professional. You tell me what I should do. We've all heard that before, I know. And sometimes we think, well, I know what's best. I know what they should be doing in this situation. So I'm just going to let them know that. It's up to us. Change those perspectives again. And again, explaining to your team and everybody is a team member. It's absolutely, you share your knowledge with the family. You share what you know about things. And we want to start where the family is, what's important to them. What we think is important may not be what the family's biggest concern is. So it's really important for us to be able to say, okay, maybe it's not a health and safety issue. We're going to start where the family is, and we'll eventually get to some of those other things. Because what we know is the more kind of power that the family feels they have, the ability to determine what's important to them, the better the outcomes, and the more likely that they will continue to be available for your visits, because you're hearing them and you're helping them in areas where they feel like they need the most support. It's about empowering them, not doing for them, but empowering them to be able to get the resources they need, make contacts, different things like that. Because really, in the scheme of life, we are with these families for a very, very short period of time. And we need to leave them with the skills that they will be able to carry on and find these supports and resources and things like that once they're no longer in early intervention. Capacity building. That's with not just the child, but we're talking about with the parent or caregiver. How do we build their capacity? How do we increase their knowledge base, make them feel more confident in what they're doing? So if you look back at all those pieces of the family-centered practice, you're going to see that your roles in every aspect, it's key. Okay, you are an important piece in everything that goes on related to family-centered practices. So, another poll. When do we start using family-centered practices? Okay. When should we start that? From the first meeting with families? Let's wait till after the evaluation and see if they're eligible. Or after the IFSP's been completed, when we actually start services. When do you start using family-centered practices?
So it looks like 100% picked A from the first meeting with families.
Perfect. Absolutely. It starts at the beginning, and Happens every contact with families. Great. You guys are on it. Okay, so why do we do it? Why is family-centered practice? What makes that better than just me going in and saying, here's what you need to work on, here's what we need to do? Family capacity building. That keeps coming back, doesn't it? It's about building the strength, the confidence, and competence of the family, not just the child. Okay? So we want to strengthen what they know, okay? And we want to maybe teach them some new skills. Okay? So it's about giving empowerment and knowledge to families. So again, promoting development of new, strengthening what they had, and building new for families, and enhancing their self-efficacy. And we think, well, what does that mean? Okay. And that's really a parent's belief that they can succeed in a particular situation. So it's helping parents to feel confident and competent in what they're doing and some of the new things that you might be showing them, working with them. That's why it's important where if you're showing them things to have them do it with you, because we want to build up that confidence and competence. If they've done it once and they feel good, you said it was good, that they were doing it right, or you helped them to reposition something. If you weren't quite there, you're going to feel more confident to do that. And that's what we want to do. We want them to feel like they can succeed in different situations with their child and family. So you guys had it on the poll. It starts with the first call, every contact after that. Okay. Early on, we know it's more about learning what the family's skills and strengths are. Okay. And it's really important to try and remain strength-based. Okay. There may be deficits, obviously. If they're in the program, there's probably some kind of concern. But what are the strengths? What can we build on? How do we get the next step in that area of concern? Try to stay strength-based. Outcomes should be written strength-based, what we want them to do. And as your relationship with the family grows, it's more about developing those new skills and confidences. Moving on to that next level. What comes next, and helping them to feel empowered that they can do this, they know. And then we give them opportunities to discuss things, to problem solve, to come up with some kind of solutions on their own as you're having conversation. That's helping them to feel more confident that, hey, I figured this out. I can probably figure out something else too. Should happen whenever the family is involved, on phone calls, when you're doing eligibility, obviously, definitely on your visits, team meetings and coaching conversations. Those should be about how to build the capacity, not about things that drive you crazy or things they're not doing, things like that. We need to try and remember to stay strength-based in all conversations about the family and how can we support them. This, as many of you know, Marilyn S.B. Sherwin, and this was something that she had written in 2008, and it's, in our desire to help others, we must remember the fine line between managing and consulting, and between controlling and having confidence in the capacity of the other. And that's just a critical thing. It is, that's fine line between, are you managing families or are you consulting with them? Oops. Are you controlling the situation or are you helping them to build confidence? What do those things look like? And sometimes we have to take a step back and say, oh, wait, I'm getting a little too close to managing. I need to step back a bit. So if we take a hard look at that, are we enabling or empowering families? What does that really mean or look like? So for enabling them, we're offering help that perpetuates rather than solves the problem. That was, if you remember, back in one of the early polls about taking families to doctor's appointment if they don't have a car. That would fall under the enabling, okay? Where we're not helping them solve the problem of transportation. We're just offering that help to take them. And empowering is to make them feel stronger and more confident, okay? Especially in controlling things within their life. So same example, family doesn't have a car, empowering them might be getting bus schedules in, helping them look at bus schedules to see what times or what bus numbers they need to do to get to the doctor's office. Or looking at if you've done an eco map or something and you know who supports are, revisiting that maybe could somebody on that eco map be a person who could be a support to take them to appointments. Different things like that are ways to help empower the family. So we think about that and we think about, well, it's easier for me if I just do it. So what's the real difference between enabling and empowering? I look at it this way. By taking care of it, which to me equals enabling, what have I just told them? What message do they get when you do that? They're not smart enough. She's going to take care of it. She knows I can't handle it. They can't do it themselves. We're telling them they need our help to be successful. They can't do it without us. And it makes us feel like we helped the family. And as I mentioned earlier, most of us probably are in this profession because we'd like to help people. So this would make us feel good. Well, we did it. I took care of it. But look at what we're telling them. But by empowering them and sharing our knowledge, what are we telling them? We show them that we believe they can do it. Okay, building up that confidence. Okay, they can do it. Oh, she thinks I can handle this. All right, well, she thinks I can, or I know if I have trouble, I can call her and she'll support me through this. Okay, we're building up their confidence. And then they begin to carry those over to other routines, other things that are important to them. Something then they can carry that confidence over once they leave early intervention and they go to preschool or they go to a daycare or whatever they do. They're going into those situations with more confidence than they would have if you had enabled them instead of empowering them. Okay. And we should feel good because we help the parent develop new skills. So we can still be in that helping profession. Just the way we help might look a little different. We're helping the parents develop new skills, which are critical and crucial for them as they continue their journey. Okay. So we help the family. It just looks a little different. And you got to share your knowledge. Sometimes I know I've heard people, not just from when I was in Hamilton County, but other counties when I've done different trainings, would say, but am I allowed to tell them what I know about this? Absolutely. That's your opportunity to share your knowledge. Okay. So ultimately, we know that families must take responsibility for themselves. They need to start making decisions and to be able to walk on their own. And that's what we need to support them with, right? So take a couple minutes to think about a visit or a meeting where you feel you empowered or built someone's confidence. How do you think they felt and how did you feel? So think about that. If you're with someone and you can talk about it, that's great. If not, it would be nice if some people would share that information that we could just kind of share with everybody. So remember, you can put it in the chat or question section, and Lori will find it. We don't have anybody who wants to share today, Lori?
I guess not, Debbie.
Okay. I'm going to give it another minute in case somebody wants to jump in there. It's always nice for other people to hear what goes on or how others feel who are doing the same thing. So I'll give it another minute. Okay, I'm going to move on. We have a quiet group today. Let's look at family strengths. Talked about this before too, that we need to stay strength-based and build from that. What is the child or the family doing that's the positive, or where they are in development, and let's build from that point, but let's keep it strength-based and not from going from a deficit angle. We want to build excuse me, we want to build on what's, what their life is, their everyday context, their routines. What does their life look like? Okay. Once we know that, we can help them to strengthen different areas in their life potentially. It's important to find their learning style, their communication style. Okay. How do they learn best? Do they like to have handouts with pictures of things? Is that important for them to have in between visits, something they can look at and kind of review with? Different things. Everybody has a different learning style, and ours might not be a match with a family, but if we can learn what that family's learning style is, we can make sure that we are addressing that to the best of our abilities to give them the best information. Why do we want to be strength-based? I've stressed that a couple times. Why would that be important? Builds confidence. We know that change is more likely to occur. Studies have showed us that if we can stay positive and build from strength and increase abilities and knowledge and skills, that change is more likely to occur. It also strengthens your relationship with the parent or caregiver, because you're not always telling them that they're not doing something or that this child is not doing certain things. You want to talk about what they are doing and how to get to that next level. Families are going to feel more positive, and it's going to build your relationship, and they're going to trust you more. Okay, so how do we build that family strength? we're going to acknowledge positives. We always want to try and find positives in all the situations we're working on with families. Involve them in everything. We've talked about that a couple times too, but it's so important that they feel like they are a piece of, and they understand that as a team member, they should be a piece of everything. Letting them make decisions. Letting them problem solve, work through things, let them determine what's most important for them. Where do they want to start with things? And gosh, listening. It's one of the greatest things we can do to families, especially, when they're talking about their child or you're trying to get an understanding of their family, is just to listen. They're not used to a lot of people listening. You may be the first people to really listen to a family. So it's really important to be able to do that. Give them positive feedback, okay? Things you can say. So take a minute, think about how you felt the last time your supervisor or maybe just somebody important in your life complimented you on something you did. How did you feel? How did that make you feel? If anybody wants to share, we're always open to that. Still a quiet group?
It is. Oh,
All right.
actually,
Oh,
I do have one. Oh, here we go. A couple comments are coming in.
awesome.
So
Thank you.
Tiffany said that it felt really good that someone noticed what I did for them. And similar comment from Rochelle. She said she felt accomplished that someone noticed.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Um, and yeah, it makes us feel good when somebody gives us a compliment. And that's the same thing for families. If we, compliment them on something that they did since the last visit, wow, you worked really, really hard. I can tell a difference. Something we may see, but maybe we don't think to say. Saying it is so important for families because it makes them feel like you felt in those situations. Okay. Family support. How do we know what a family has or what they need? Okay. If we're doing an eco map or some other kind of assessment, we can find out what supports are already in place. Okay. Are they already hooked up with a medical home? Are they in any kind of private therapies? What are siblings in, taking ballet classes? Is there another child who gets speech therapy in the family? What kind of supports are there, and what the supports are for everybody in the family? Again, not just a child in the program, but what's going on? What supports do they have? Are there financial supports that they're hooked up with? Are they hooked up with a system that will give them rides to places? Different things. We need to know what do they have already, because then those are things that we can check and make sure they're working smoothly, but we don't have to try and support them in getting hooked up with them. So what do they have when they're coming in? That will help determine what our role is with the family. So What is it? What do they need? And again, it's going to help we support families building their sense of competence. So there's different types of supports that we can give them. We can give them the community outside support information to help build that. We can also support them by helping them to feel more confident within their daily life with their child or children. How do we find out about supports? I just talked about an eco map or some other kind of a family assessment. Listening. Okay. So we also need to let them choose starting points. That's a way to support them. We've given them the ability to realize that they are an important member of the team. We're going to share our knowledge to help build their knowledge base. And we're going to promote growth and independence. We've talked about listening a couple times. So I want you to think about this. Are we hearing families or are we listening to them? Okay. If we're hearing them, that's just kind of the ability to hear the sound, what they're saying. Okay. It goes in, we hear it. It's the function. It's the ability for you to hear, to understand and to sense those noises and tones. Okay. Or are you listening? Listening is paying attention to that sound. And I love this definition, to hear something with thoughtful attention. Okay? Thoughtful attention. That to me that explains it all. Okay? So are you giving parents that attention? Are you making eye contact with them when they're talking, when they're trying to tell you something? Or are you just hearing them? It's going in while you're, updating something on the IFSP, making notes, doing whatever. There's a big difference between that. So it's really important, I think, to do that, giving them that thoughtful attention when they're talking. So really listen. Okay, another reflection. So when you first started as a professional in this field, how did the support you received build your confidence in the job? Did you get support and feel like that built your confidence? Or maybe some places you're just you're hired, learn on the job. And how did that help or not? So, talk between you, or again, it would be great if some people want to share. So we'll give that a couple minutes. Are they a quiet group again?
Well, I just got a comment
Okay.
from Tiffany. She said everyone was very supportive and willing to help me and answer my questions that I had. It made me feel great to have the care and support from my coworkers.
Awesome. I'm excited that you had that kind of an experience, Tiffany, and that you did feel supported. And so sometimes we just need to remember how that felt for ourselves, and because that's how we want families to feel. Okay? We want them to feel like, oh, I got the support I needed and now I can do my job, which is being the mom or being the dad or being the caregiver. All right. So one more timeline of progression, how things have changed. When we look at interventions that we have provided to families, there's the participation-based intervention, which really is about how the child participates with the family and in community activities and daily routines rather than only teaching skills missed on an assessment. So I'm not even going back as far as the old, we used to do an evaluation and we would work on stacking 6 blocks or different things, okay? We're just talking about, the participation base. We're starting there. And then there's the routine-based intervention, which, Robin McWilliam kind of developed and moved forward with that, where we're using the family's routines and activities as the context for the intervention, what we're doing, okay? And what happens to a family on a daily basis is where our outcomes that the parent selects, that's where we start, okay? We do them in the common settings for the family. And then we get into coaching and collaborative consultation, okay? And that's just Rush and Sheldon, okay? So we're using specific strategies and interactions to support and guide the learning of adults who can be of assistance to a child with special needs. Excuse me. So we've kind of taken a little turn here, and we're putting the emphasis on the learning of the adults, okay? So Rush and Sheldon have said, and I'm sure probably some of you have done, training with them and gone to some of their in-services and really got to be to hear a lot about this and hear it from some of the best, okay? So if we're doing coaching and collaboration with families, what does that mean? Okay. We're going to help families to reflect on what they're currently doing with their child, okay? What does it look like? What's happening now? And kind of where can we build on that, okay? Then we're looking at engaging in shared problem solving. Again, kind of that give parents the opportunity, okay? And then we're going to plan and come up with strategies that can be used, okay? We're going to develop a joint plan for how the family will do the intervention in their daily routines, okay? It's going to be a joint plan because you're going to be a part of it as well. You're going to be the support, okay? And then we're going to follow up at each visit. We're going to answer questions that they may have that have come up since we were there last, and we're going to provide support, maybe around things they had questions on, or provide support for moving to that next step. What do we want to do now? Okay, so all those things fall into the coaching and collaboration with families and family-centered practices, keeping the family as the main, all this is we're doing is we're revolving around the family. Okay, so something to remember is that it's not a family-centered practices, it's not a destination, and being a family-centered provider is not something that happens instantly to people, especially if we've been in early intervention for a number of years, and it's kind of a switch for us, okay? It's a process, okay? It's the continual pursuit of being responsive to the priorities and the choices of families. Okay, so it may take us a minute to get there, okay? But we need to remember that as families face the future, change is inevitable, as it is for all of us. I think this is true for not just our families, but for all of us, okay? Their lives will not be free of pain. There are no guarantees, and they're going to have difficult times. Well, that kind of really describes all of us, right? Because eventually there's going to be things that are going to be difficult for all of us in our lives, okay? So we can't keep that from happening to families. But the professionals who have made the biggest differences are the ones who can send families forward better informed, better able to problem solve, families who can be more resilient when they are facing the unknown, and that they're able to build on their own strengths and their child's strengths. So it comes down to that whole empowering and building confidence and sharing your knowledge with families, and then they're better able to deal with those things that come along in their life. And because the interactions are multifaceted and reciprocal, guess what? We find we change too. Okay, we talked about it being a process to be able, doesn't happen overnight necessarily, to be able to keep all your services, be family centered, and to remember that the families, they're equal members and all the things we've already talked about. It's going to change us too. How we interact with families, how we perceive families, and how we build and strengthen the lives of the families that come to our programs. So, if you wanted to know more about family-centered practices, there's webinars, presentations. Marilyn Espy Sherwin does, and she's an excellent presenter. There's a Russian Sheldon video on the Ohio train. Okay, so I'd like to leave you with an action practice, and that is to complete there on the ECTA Center website, and I think the consultants may have this. I might be wrong, but I think the consultants may have access to it too. But you can go to the ECTA Center, and there is a Family Center Practices checklist. So I'd like you to download that and look at it as a self-evaluation. Where are you in your process? Okay, look at it strength-based. What can you build on? Because none of us are perfect there 100% all the time. We all have things we can work on. So identify an area of growth and concentrate on that for your next visit you're doing with a family. See if it makes you feel any different, if you think perceptions from the family are any different. And your state consultants are always available for support. So I do a follow-up to this, and it's providing family-centered practices to families in some of our most challenging settings. And the settings that I use were actually determined from a survey that was done actually last year. So it may be families, some of you live in rural areas, so maybe, how do you deal with those situations? We've all had families who have complicated needs, parents who have issues and concerns as well. A lot of us are dealing with families who are living in shelters, things like that. How do we do that?
Well, on behalf of the department, I want to thank everyone for your participation today. And thank you, Debbie.
My pleasure.
All right, and have a great rest of your day.